proud to say that we finally got justice for Ahmaud on the federal level.
February 23rd marks Ahmaud Arbery Day, the 25-year-old black king who was murdered during a racially motivated hate crime on this very day back in 2020. Now, for a third year, lawmakers, community activists, and family members joined together to celebrate the life of a promising young man and many others like him. Hey, soulmates, welcome to the conversation on this Thursday, February 23rd. We are talking about National Ahmaud Arbery Day and what the FBI did during BLM protests that has lawmakers upset. I want to welcome you again to FOXSOUL's Black Report. I'm Courtney Hicks.
And I'm Nicordelai Corte, plus the new program to help locate missing black women and girls and the teachers who are making headlines for mocking Florida's decision to remove certain black literature. They're the stories that impact our people.
It is our news, our views, and of course, our voice. So, topping the conversation today, this year, a 2.2-mile run will honor the memory of Ahmaud Arbery and the verdict that put his killers behind bars. In fact, several Georgia state lawmakers will join in on the annual run, marking today as 3 years since his death. Now, the distance recognizes the date Arbery was jogging through the Santilla Shores neighborhood of Brunswick near Georgia's coast back on February 23rd, 2020. Scott was among the Georgia legislators who also introduced the House Resolution 688 last year, which solidified the date as Ahmaud Arbery Day. Last year, the Ahmaud Arbery Foundation announced it will offer six $3,000 scholarships to seniors from Arbery's high school. And you know, I can't believe it's already, Nicordelai, been 3 years. I was in Augusta, Georgia when this story broke. It's about 2 counties over from Glenn County. I was in Richmond County. This happened in Glenn County in the Brunswick area. And I remember the fallout being very damaging for the young folks in our newsroom. The reporters were very young, the editors were very young, the photogs, the camera people were very young, and it just hit them so hard. I remember one particular reporter, Sydney Moore, it's a young lady, and she was tasked to find an inside story. She collected a group of very young black men who were about the same age as Ahmaud Arbery, who were from the very different communities in between Augusta and Brunswick. And she filed a report, and the young men were just in tears saying they were avid runners, and at this point their families, their girlfriends, their wives did not want them to run anymore. That's how much Ahmaud Arbery's story impacted them.
Yeah, it really shook the conscience of our communities across the country. There were a number of folks who committed to acts of solidarity, running 2.2 miles in honor of Ahmaud Arbery. And, you know, just the fact that this young king, this young black man was doing something as simple as jogging, something that so many of us do. And he was, quite frankly, hunted. He was hunted by folks that didn't think that he deserved to live. And to make matters worse, it looked like the folks that hunted him were shielded by the then district attorney who is being held to account. You know, the fact that a district attorney is now being held accountable, and there is not just an active investigation, but there's a court case that is underway to hold them accountable. That is a modicum of the justice that we all hope to see in a system that really renders our life meaningless under the law.
Yeah, I remember a lot of folks that we were able to talk to on the street saying, shot down like an animal.
Yeah.
It was just disgraceful once you saw that video. And let me tell you, just the hurt and the anger in that community at the time, very much reminiscent of how things were later on when we came into the George Floyd situation, the same kind of anger and outrage. And it just kept going that year, the year of 2020.
But Courtney, even worse than an animal. I mean, you look at the treatment that Michael Vick got, for, his, abuse of animals and the way he was dealing with the dogs. You look at the effect that case had in terms of public consciousness compared to Ahmaud Arbery. We have a ways to go. Moving along, a new investigative podcast called Alphabet Boys has revealed that the FBI paid a felon to infiltrate Denver's Black Lives Matter protest in 2020. It's being alleged that Michael Adam Windecker II was paid to target black activists and coerce them into joining a plot to assassinate Colorado Attorney General Phil Weiser. After the release of Alphabet Boys, Democratic Senator Ron Wyden of Oregon publicly condemned the FBI's actions against BLM activists. And in that statement from Senator Wyden, he said, quotes, "If the allegations in Mr. Aronson's podcast are true, the FBI's use of informant to spy on First Amendment protected activities and stoke violence at peaceful protesters is outrageous, and it's an abuse of law enforcement resources and authority." I couldn't agree with Senator Wyden more. And this is a part of what, the movement for police reform has been calling for. They've said that law enforcement is out of control. So whether we're talking about local law enforcement or we're talking about agencies like the FBI, we really need Congress to act.
And that is why today, a day like today, Ahmaud Arbery, because you have that huge platform, if you will, that mantle. But then there's so much that falls up under that umbrella, and police accountability is a big conversation today as we mark Ahmaud's day and we celebrate his life. And this is why politicians are coming together. This is why that push must continue. His family is in the headlines today saying, hey, we cannot forget that this is not over. And we continue to celebrate Ahmaud's life, and we continue to push for police accountability. And I think it's all intertwined within this story and the conversation we just previously had surrounding Ahmaud Arbery Day. It's a never-ending conversation. It's like one thought with a lot of different elements, and there's so much to address. There's so much to attack. You can get lost in the sauce, and so that's why we have to make things very clear and make sure that we stay on code with the results that we want to see happen, with the results that we want to see yielded by way of these conversations and these pushes.
And speaking of results, just as we had to put pressure on the system to deliver some modicum of justice for Ahmaud Arbery's family, we're having to put the same pressure on the same system to deliver justice for Tyree Nichols' family and Keenan Anderson's family and too many families out there.
Indeed. All right, the Minnesota House has passed a bill to create an Office of Missing and Murdered Black Women and Girls, the first of its kind in the country. Now, the push to create a new office followed a state report from the Missing and Murdered African American Task Force that found Black women are nearly 3 times more likely to be murdered than white women in Minnesota. In the United States, there are more than 60,000 estimated missing Black women. In Minnesota, Black women make up 7% of the population, but 40% of the domestic violence victims. Big thumbs up for Minnesota. Nicola, I'm hoping this catches fire and every state consider legislation such as this, especially how we are continue to be grossly underrepresented when it comes to our missing, when it comes to those, our loved ones who we can't find. There's just been this under the radar kind of approach as to, when these stories break, why they're covered, when they're not covered. I agree with Minnesota, and I'm hoping these other states pay attention to what Minnesota is trying to push, has pushed forward.
Yeah, and I think sometimes we have a warped idea of who missing children are. I think oftentimes we think of them as not being Black kids. And 337,000 missing kids are Black kids. 37% of missing children are Black kids. And so for people out there that may think that missing kids, that's not a Black issue, that doesn't happen a lot in our community, it happens more than you think. Amber Alerts are rare. It's hard to meet the criteria to get an Amber Alert, but 37% of Amber Alerts were for Black kids, right? And so there is so much more we have to do on this front, and I really look forward to us continuing to keep our eye and to do even more to raise consciousness around missing Black kids.
And this is a question of humanity.
Particularly women and girls.
This is a question of humanity versus, what's going to get the eyeballs on your newscast. Is it this story or that story? This is about a missing child, and it's also about worth. How those who are responsible of putting these stories out or not, how they deem children of color, black children in particular, or black missing folks in particular, how worthy they deem us or not. So I think it's a matter of humanity as well.
I think you're right. I think you're right. Well, moving along from Minnesota to Alabama, where there are newly released recordings of Stephen Reed, Montgomery's first black mayor, where he's heard in a profanity-laced rant. Now, the recordings are allegedly 3 years old and was leaked online this week on a site called Montgomery Deserves Better. On the recordings, Reed can be heard saying that he doesn't need the black vote and, in fact, doesn't need to do anything systematically, and he will still win. Mayor Reed says these recordings are being used as an extortion attempt.
Well, whether you agree with his rant or not, he does bring up the question as to, when you have these major cities or smaller towns that are black, as far as, police department leadership, the Board of Education, utilities, even the mayor office may be pretty much black. How much power, do they really have? Who is really running these cities? Who is really calling the shots? Who's really holding the cards when it comes down to the policy, when it comes down to the money, when it comes down to, what folks want for those individual cities and communities? So he brings up a great point. Whether you agree with the rant or not, I think he brings up a great point as to what does that black representation really mean, to have a black mayor in a seat or to have a black police chief? What does it really mean? How much worth does it really hold when it comes to a trickle-down effect as to what we needed to do as black people who are living in these communities? Does it really mean anything?
Yeah, well, to me, it's very clear, that mayors nor any elected official doesn't have absolute power.
True.
And that's part of what, he's saying sort of inartfully, is that he doesn't have absolute power.
And the question is how much power they really do have.
And another very important question is, so what does it look like to build black power in Montgomery, right? Well, where is that conversation happening? And so we'll continue to keep our eye on this. But Mayor Reed, we invite you to come on FOXSOUL's Black Report to share more about, what did you really mean?
Have a rant with us. All right, let's go to Florida now, where a teacher is in hot water for a recent online post. His name is Ethan Hooper, and he's a 6th grade language arts teacher at Howard Middle School who decided to mock Florida's book ban. He has been placed on leave after his viral TikTok video showed him confiscating books from students and showing white students acting as servants to black classmates. Is it, Nick Cordelai, we were debating a little bit, is it a mocking, you think? Is it inappropriate, you think? I mean, is it a demonstration? Is it role reversal?
Or is it perhaps a simulation, which happens in classrooms across the country all the time? Was this teacher sort of seizing this as a teachable moment for students, not intended to shame anyone or to make light of anything, but to educate people, to put folks in the shoes of somebody else, to develop a sense of empathy in the classroom. And so, that was my sense when I read the story, but who knows for sure if whether or not the teacher had intended that, but it happens all the time. I've done simulations in my classroom before. There's an exercise called the privilege walk that I do with my students, and sometimes there are students that end up in tears by the time we finish that exercise. It's not intended to make anybody feel bad, but it's intended to develop some self-awareness and some empathy.
So a reenactment, a simulation, the question is, was it inappropriate or not? Was it offensive or not? So that's where the real debate comes in. For me, it wasn't. I don't mind role reversal. So maybe somebody outside of the experience can get a hands-on feel of what it feels like.
Yeah. And the one thing we just got to keep in mind is, what is grade appropriate, what is age appropriate, but assuming that this was in the curriculum
and within context,
I'm almost sure that the powers that be at that school were not surprised that this happened, but we'll continue to keep our eye on that. Well, we all know that the power of Black Twitter, from finding long-lost loved ones to changing the atmosphere of our nation, is pretty powerful. So here's 3 hashtags that are being credited for changing America. The hashtags are featured in the new documentary called Black Twitter, the Twitterverse that changed a generation. And they are Black Lives Matter, which started in 2013 following the death of Trayvon Martin. Oscars So White, which broke the internet on the morning of January 15, 2015, following the Oscar nominations. And lastly, Mute R. Kelly, which became popular in 2017, and that's still being echoed today due to his ongoing sexual assault trials.
I just can't wait until this documentary, is released and gives like a full-on view and perspective of Black Twitter and how vital and important and crucial it has been. That's why we were paying so much attention to old boy and what he planned to do with Twitter, because we know Black Twitter has been a nucleus, a system in and of itself that I feel is the heartbeat of Twitter. So let's take it back to 2009. Young lady by the name of Ashley Witherspoon, who was an assistant to Adrienne Bailon, Bailon, 3W, 3LW. She was on The Real. And she was just messing around with her girlfriends and playing. And she put out a hashtag back in 2009 that says, "You know you Black win." And that is when Twitter was born. And we know what it has led to now and the importance of it. I just want it to continue to be documented and recognized for being the force that it is.
Yeah, and not undervalued or
That's
undercut.
Right.
You know, I know we've reported on the fact that Twitter is now embracing sort of the subscription model, and if you want to get a blue check, you got to pay for it. And I just sort of wonder, how that may negatively impact our voice when it comes to Black Twitter. But policy change, culture change, narrative change, we owe Black Twitter a great debt, for playing an outsized role in helping to enable that to happen in our country.
And it's funny and it's entertaining. Anytime something's going on in the world, go to Black Twitter, honey. You will get a cup full and then some.
That's
Your
right.
cup will runneth over.
Well, coming up, a controversial display at a Georgia supermarket featuring a famous rapper's wine label sparks a heated debate.
They better leave the dog father alone. We'll tell you what happened to the Black history gesture next on Fox Soul's Black Report.
Welcome back. Well, a recent study published in the Journal of General Internal Medicine has found that Black and Hispanic patients are more likely to develop lasting symptoms following a COVID-19 diagnosis.
Now, the study, funded by the National Institutes of Health, identified several symptoms that were more common among these populations, including Black patients having a higher likelihood of developing blood clots in the lungs or diagnosed with diabetes after COVID-19. Now, although it is unclear why there are differing effects or after effects, I should say, of COVID-19 in ethnic or racial groups, authors of the study say identifying potential racial and ethnic disparities in long COVID is an important step towards making sure we have an equitable response to the long-term consequences of coronavirus infection.
Living God Church is among 11 primarily Black churches in the Cincinnati area that have joined a voluntary effort to ensure that their members recognize that overdose deaths from fentanyl are a serious threat to their community and their families. Overdose deaths among Black people are spiraling in Hamilton County, reflecting a nationwide shift in the opioid epidemic and demanding new local strategies to try to stop the dying. In comparison with the nearly 200% jump among Black residents here, white people and others saw a 7% increase in overdose deaths in Hamilton County during the same period. Now, still, this surge may be no match for volunteers of the African American Engagement Work Group. They've recruited pastors at churches in Cincinnati, mostly Black neighborhoods, to engage their congregants and they're beginning to deliver results. And really a shout out to the African American Engagement Working Group, their quick response team. Their quick response team had 500, almost 600 Black people that were referred to their outreach team. And this is tremendous because just in a couple of years, they've gone from 0 to 80 in 5 seconds. And, there are a lot of people, that, recognize that this is an issue, particularly among white folks. But in terms of Black folks, folks have been very slow to give us the resources that we need to address the opioid epidemic in Black communities. That's what I was going to say.
That's what intrigues me about this particular story. It'll be interesting to see how efforts like this continue to change the narrative when it comes to opioid addiction and overdoses. It has always been seen as a white problem, which is why you got a lot of criticism from the Black community because it being deemed as a white problem, there was more resources, there was more forgiveness, there was more leniency in the justice system, and we were labeled as the crack folks, and we didn't get much resources when crack was ravishing our communities, our streets, our parents, our kids, what have you. There was not much grace. There wasn't a lot of leniency. There wasn't a lot of care and concern. So let's just be, flat out with that. So it'll be interesting to see how, now that this opioid situation is beginning to affect people of color, will the argument and will the effort to rid this problem stay as adamant and stay as forceful as it's been being deemed a white issue.
Yeah, we've got some work to do.
Indeed. Sleep is an essential aspect of human life, and it is crucial for overall health and well-being. However, according to research, Blacks don't enjoy equal access to quality sleep. You don't say. It's hard being Black in America. Sometimes we lose sleep. They're killing us. They're laying us off.
It's hard because we got to stay woke.
Yeah, there we go. According to a Northwestern University School of Medicine expert on racial disparities in cardiovascular disease, national data indicates that Black adults have poorer sleep. Researchers want to address disparities because lack of sleep is associated with some of the leading causes of death, including cardiovascular disease. We must also consider that a lot of Black Americans live in areas that are more populated with traffic, construction, factories, or airports, linking these factors to poor sleep as well. I think you just hit it on the head. It's hard, being Black in America, you got to stay woke, and so therefore you don't get a lot of sleep.
Yeah.
I think that's the alpha and the omega of this particular point.
This isn't just anecdotal. I mean, there are researchers that have looked at the effect of weathering, right? That's what they call the weathering effect. The effect that racial bias and that racial bigotry has on us over a period of time. And a lot of this ties back to, sort of cardiovascular related issues, right? And, I've been, very candid about some of the cardiovascular related issues that exist in my family on both sides, right? And, just reading this article made me wonder, I wonder if, sleep-related issues, have also existed on both sides of the family. And so it's just another reminder to do the best you can to get some rest.
But it can also just be as simple as not feeling comfortable in your own home. We all know the story of how we were brought over here, forced into slavery, and how, we're here and we've been here, so this is our home. But there's always this level of uncomfortability in regards to what we still have to continue to deal with, because we don't feel comfortable. Our history is always questioned. Our hair is questioned. Our bodies have been put in question. So it's also a matter of just not being able to relax. A part of being able to sleep and get a good rest is first to be able to relax yourself. Black folks can't relax. We'd be all dead, physically, mentally, spiritually, if we relax. I think that has a lot to do with it too. You just cannot let up.
Yeah, and we can't give short shrift to the need to pay attention to our sleeping patterns. I mean, from a mental health standpoint, how often have we heard of stories of folks that went long periods of time without getting rest and may have harmed others or harmed themselves? And so, we've got to do better in terms of being in optimum health from the neck up and the neck down. Well, moving along, the history of Aunt Jemima is one tied to racist mammy tropes. And in June 2020, Quaker Oats announced that it would be retiring the Aunt Jemima brand and logo, acknowledging that the character was based on a racist stereotype. In spite of Quaker Oats' attempt to right this wrong in recent years, this week, Aunt Jemima became a hot topic on social media after Ben Stein, actor and former host of Win Ben Stein's Money, posted a video saying he missed seeing the caricature of the syrup bottle. Let's take a look.
Do something which I sometimes do, which is to make breakfast for dinner. Aunt Jemima, yummy pancake syrup. Now, this used to show a large African-American woman chef, but because of the inherent racism of Americans' corporate culture, they decided to make it a white person, or maybe no person at all. But I preferred it when it was a black person showing their incredible skill at making pancakes.
The inherent racism of corporate culture, well, you know, I think Ben Stein's Google might not have worked so well, because if he would have taken the time to research this, he would have found out that the original Aunt Jemima character was based on a minstrel show called Old Aunt Jemima, who was performed by white actors in blackface. And so, you know, I'm with D.L. Hughley and so many of all of our soulmates, you know, who have responded to this on social, calling Ben Stein out. You know, if we're going to call out some of the other folks, you know, that have demonstrated a lack of sensitivity, a lack of a disregard for history, a lack of empathy and compassion, then, you know, we need to add Ben Stein to the list.
But there are also soulmates who say that they weren't offended by Aunt Jemima. We might as well throw Uncle Ben in there too, the rice. I think it boils down to, you know, when the whole George Floyd rush, if you will, came about, and all the fallout, and corporate America and white folks trying to make good on all of the violations, the code violations of, you know, throughout history. And I think that they may have deemed Aunt Jemima and Uncle Ben offensive, instead of there maybe just being some sort of kind of dialogue, because there are black folks out there who feel that, you know, Uncle Ben and Aunt Jemima weren't necessarily offensive, and they were used to seeing it on the shelves as well. Now you have the Pearl Milling Company labeling. It looks very different. So I just think the problem is a lack of communication, a lack of maybe a sit down. There were times, I know that's a 133-year history of Aunt Jemima being on that cover, or on that box, if you will. But there's been like a civil rights movement. There's been the Harlem Renaissance even before that. There's now Black Lives Matter, where there should have been already a sit down to figure out what's going to be appropriate and what's not going to be appropriate, instead of assuming what's going to be offensive to us or not.
Yeah, but you know what? I think the operative word
to make good on your guilt.
The operative word is history. The operative word is history, and you know, you can't run away from the history. I mean, this is why folks are making such a big deal about teaching Black history in schools, advanced placement Black history in schools. If more people were steeped in the history of Aunt Jemima, then I think more people would be absolutely outraged, you know, by this.
But you got to talk to the people who you're saying it offends, so you can move forward properly. How are you not going to include us in the conversation about what you think offends us? So here we go. Speaking of history, the Black History Month display at a supermarket in Georgia featuring Snoop Dogg's popular 19 Crimes wine was taken down after several customer complaints. Now, the display was in full view upon entrance near the produce section. Johnny Jones, customer and former NAACP chapter president, called this display, quote, offensive and has nothing to do with Black history. Proud of drinking wine? No. Jones said, we're proud of the Tuskegee Airmen whose shoulders I stand on. That's his quote there. Now, according to Jones, next to the display was a board reading Celebrating Black History Month with a clenched fist accompanied with phrases like dream like Martin and say it loud, I'm Black and I'm proud.
You know, listen. I think there's room for plenty of perspectives here. I think sometimes people forget that, you know, Black history makers come in all different shapes and sizes and forms, right? And for people that may be a little less steeped in the history of the wine industry, it has not been an industry, you know, that has welcomed Black folks with open arms. And so, you know, the fact that Snoop Dogg is not just the face of, but has part ownership in you know, this wine company, that is a demonstration of progress. It may and it may not be in the same form as Martin Luther King or, you know, some of the folks that Mr. Jones mentioned, of which shoulders we all stand on, but we can't diminish the celebration, you know, of Snoop Dogg. This is a grocery store. Listen, I've been in the wine shops recently, and I've seen them, pull out their Black-owned brands and put them, on display in the front. And so I actually didn't see anything wrong with Snoop Dogg's wine being in plain view at the Kroger store in Georgia.
Listen, can we all, what did Rodney King say?
Can we all just get along?
Bless his soul. Can we all just, not even just get along, can we just talk? Because if Black folks were in the marketing meetings before they went to task to put these displays up, maybe the message wouldn't have been either mixed, or maybe it wouldn't have been misconstrued, or maybe it would have been clear as to what they were trying to do. Maybe you want to separate messages, one in the front of the store and one in the back of the store. But if you would just include us in on the conversation, you wouldn't have to backpedal like you have. So
we're going to include you in on the conversation.
Yeah, man,
coming up next.
You better call us.
The Motown Museum has been undergoing a huge expansion, and now they've reopened for tours.
Yeah, we'll take you there for a closer look when we come back. You're watching Fox Soul's Black Report. Hey, Motown Museum. We still going at it during the commercial, right? All this black today. This wasn't planned, by the way.
Well, Ahmaud Arbery Day. I think this is a very somber day for our communities, and so I think we were feeling that energetically this morning, even before we walked into the station.
I want to welcome you back to Fox Soul's Black Report, the place for our news, our views, and our voice. The Crown Act is something we've talked about a great deal here on the Black Report.
That's right. The Crown Act stands for Create a Respectful and Open World for Natural Hair. And there's a push in Michigan to make sure it passes.
That's
Fox
right.
2's Ingrid Kelly has the story.
At this storefront on the Avenue of Fashion in Detroit, natural hair is a way of life.
We get our hair braided, we lock our hair, we twist our hair.
But even this stylist admits he believes he pays a hefty price for how he chooses to style his hair.
You discriminate me because of how I wear my hair. You don't know me at all.
But a group of state lawmakers are advocating for change. On Tuesday, a press conference was held to highlight the introduction of the Crown Act.
I am pleased to report that the Crown Act has passed in over 20 states, and we hope to have Michigan be the 21st state to finally end hair discrimination. Over the last few years, we've reintroduced with no action from the legislature.
The Crown and Crown Act stands for Create a Respectful and Open World for Natural Hair. And the act works to ensure protection against discrimination by extending statutory protection to hair texture and protective styles, such as braids, in the workplace and in public schools. And these lawmakers say Black women often face the most backlash.
After having several conversations with the news director about improving my skills, he very directly said, "You won't get a job in TV with your hair like that."
Those who push for natural hair say it's beneficial in many ways and should be respected.
Gives people hair from being processed and permed and pressed and broken down to have it growing to be naturally strong and healthy.
Lawmakers say some parts of Michigan, like Detroit and Oakland County, have adopted the Crown Act in the absence of legislative leadership. But these lawmakers say it's time for all of Michigan to get on board.
The time is now, given that we finally have a Democratic majority that actually listens to the will of the people. I hope that some of our Republican colleagues can get on board, but we're going to move forward regardless.
In Detroit, Ingrid Kelly, Fox 2 News.
Wow, takes me down memory lane. I remember being in journalism school at USC, and I remember, being encouraged to shave. Because, the message was that if you had a beard, you probably weren't going to get hired in this industry. And here we are many years later, and I'm sitting here as bearded as I can be.
Yeah, but
right? But in too many places across the country and around the world, whether you have a beard or a natural hairstyle, right, that holds people back, and it also messes with people's money because, we wonder where this racial wealth gap comes from. This is a part of how it happens, right? When, there are silly rules that people make up or there's a lack of legislative protection, that says that you can be your whole self when you go to work, including wearing your natural hair, or in my case, wearing your natural hair on your face.
Yeah, but there's a bit of a divide because, as a black woman, I'm going to get more heavily ridiculed about my hair than you are as a man wearing a beard or not. I just think, that weight comes down very heavy on black women in particular, regardless of how you choose to wear your hair. If I can, pinpoint any positive in the pandemic, it was we couldn't get to our stylists. So, news directors, as you heard them alluded to in that package, allowed for, if you will, us to just come to work as we were, if you will. And I think that spawned a lot of natural hair care conversations, and it was a lot more accepted, whether it was braids, whether it was your natural curly texture. And regardless of how you choose to wear it, leave my hair alone. It's just my hair, whether it's a protective hairstyle with braids up under it, I can pull this thing back and I can get real with you, but leave it alone. Let my talent speak for itself, and allow me to be who I am. Whether it's a professional, a black professional, and all the uniqueness and beauty that comes along with that. Just leave it alone. And I think
but that's a big part of what this is about. It's not just the ridicule that folks have to endure, but it's this narrow definition of what does professionalism look like on your head, or in my case, on your face. But moving on, trends are showing a historic drought in parts of Africa. A newly released Climate Center report says the drought is worse than it was during 2011, when at least 250,000 people died. Below normal rainfall is expected in the rainy season over the next 3 months. The IGAD Climate Prediction and Application Center stated, quotes, "This could be the 6th failed consecutive rainfall season in the region that includes Somalia, Ethiopia, and Kenya." This is according to the center. The drought, the longest on record in Somalia, has lasted almost 3 years. Tens of thousands of people are said to have died. More than 1 million people have been displaced in Somalia alone.
Let's move on to Haiti and Portugal, where they have qualified for the Women's World Cup finals for the first time. After winning playoff matches this week in New Zealand, they have taken 2 of the last 3 places at the World Cup, which will be decided the 10-team intercontinental playoff in New Zealand. The 9th edition of the World's Women's Cup will take place from July 20th through August 20th across 10 stadiums in Australia and New Zealand, 6 in Australia and 4 in New Zealand.
After months of construction, the Motown Museum in Detroit is opening its doors for guests. Starting today, you can get a first look at some of the new upgrades. Fox 2's Erica Francis in Detroit with a first look.
Well, this is my first time at the Motown Museum. Certainly will not be the last, because I am so thrilled by all of the history and all of the amazing people that stepped foot in this very room. I've got a very important person here. This is the CEO and chairman of the Motown Museum. You guys were closed for a couple months. You're going through this expansion project, reopening today to the public. How exciting.
It's super exciting. I mean, this is what we do. So if you ask my team, we've been waiting for this moment to welcome the community back into this space. So it's very, very exciting for us.
Talk to me a little bit more about this expansion project. I know you already finished phase 1, phase 2, and now we're moving into phase 3.
We're moving into the final phase of expansion. So the expansion will literally create a campus that celebrates the great legacy of Motown all around this special little space that we're standing, which is in Studio A at Hitsville, USA.
What about this new plaza outside? How fun in the summer. That is going to be perfect.
So that's when you've got to come back.
And I will.
Because on August 8th, we opened phases 1 and 2. Okay. Hitsville next, which is really like our little academy on the campus. It's a creative hub for our emerging artists, emerging entrepreneurs. And then there's that magical plaza. And the plaza is just a beautiful space. Sit on the park benches, listen to Motown music. People dance, they sing, and it's just a wonderful way to activate the community.
Yeah, and that's really what Detroit is all about. I love that. Talk to me about the draw. What brings people here? If somebody's watching this segment and they're thinking to themselves, man, I've never been there, but why should they come here?
Motown is this magical space where we're standing, Studio A. When you think of the music that came from this space, everything Motown created from 1959 to 1972 was in this space. Artists like Stevie Wonder, Diana Ross and the Supremes, the Four Tops, Temptations, Marvin Gaye, they all got their start right here where you're standing. And so you can't get this anywhere else in the world. Detroit's very, very fortunate to be able to call this space home, and vice versa, to be home in Detroit. So it's just a special space, and there's something about the nostalgia. If you grew up in this area, this reminds you of those best childhood memories. And if you didn't grow up in it, there's an inspiration that you get here that you just can't get anywhere else.
Wow, you seriously nailed it. And how lucky are we, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so the tours start again today.
Tours start again today, and I will tell you, as much as we've been waiting on the community, they've been waiting on us. We are already sold out all morning long, and still have a couple spaces left this afternoon.
All right. And how do people get tickets?
So it's simple. You can go online on motownmuseum.org and order your tickets. You can take a chance and come down, but I wouldn't recommend that when the demand is so high.
Oh, my goodness. Amazing. Thank you so much for having me out here. This is truly fabulous. It really is. We are reporting from the Motown Museum in downtown Detroit. Erica Francis, Fox 2 News.
Thanks, Erica, for the full rundown on this Motown story and much more. You can access Fox Soul's video on demand with any of our streaming partners. And don't forget, Soulmates, to download the Fox Soul app. It is absolutely free. And being a native Detroiter, it's good to see stories like this, because it reminds you of how unique of a city that you come from, and all of this talent, this cornucopia of talent. But it's also like, but you know what? The Motown folks grew up with my parents. I went to school with Motown kids, so it's also like I'm a part of that story too.
Well, I'm just pleased to be here in Detroit at a time where they are getting ready to reveal sort of the next iteration of the Motown Museum. I'm gonna be there to check it out.
But
road trip.
I know. But if you're from here, you know somebody who knows somebody. You might even be related to a Motown artist. So it's just a great feeling to see the worldwide impact and how important Detroit is when you talk about the landscape of Black music.
That's right.
Wouldn't be no music without it.
That's right. Well, up next, the Oscars slap that is still being felt around the world.
They still talking about this slap. It has birthed a new emergency system for the award show, how the Academy is putting together a crisis team in response to last year's incident between Will Smith and Chris Rock. We'll be right back. Why did they so long? Like what?
Well, the Oscars is right around the corner. Hey Soulmates, you're watching Fox Soul's Whack Report. It's our news, our views, and our voice. It's lights, camera, crisis. After Will Smith slapped Chris Rock on stage at last year's Oscars, the Academy of Motion Pictures Arts and Sciences has formed a crisis team, can you believe that, to handle unexpected incidents.
A little bit too late, right, to me. The CEO said the team is prepared for anything with crisis plans in place to quickly deliver a statement. Smith is banned from Academy events, including the Oscars, for 10 years. In a recent YouTube video, he apologized to Rock. So let's hope this year's Oscars stick to the script. And we just talked about this the other day, how it's just so unfortunate, because I have a list of the movies I need to catch up on. King Richard was one of them. I finally did it over the weekend. His performance was amazing. And I hate that slap, I hate that decision in that moment caused for that moment, that historic moment, to just be obliterated by this slap, because he really did an excellent job as the Williams dad. He was really, really great in that movie, and it's just unfortunate. Shame on him. 10 years. What does that really? What does that really solve? What does that really do? What does that really say? I feel like this committee should have been formed immediately and probably handled much better. I don't think, as far as I know, Chris Rock has not accepted an apology. So this is still a personal thing, sounds like, between them. And I don't know if there's much left for the Oscars to try to clean up behind it. It's kind of like a little too late.
I mean, I would have thought that within the past year, we might have seen Will Smith and Chris Rock sort of make up.
Like sit down with somebody?
You know, I think that could be, I still believe that can be a powerful demonstration for black men and men across the country and around the world in terms of, you know, how we can settle our disputes, you know, how we can do it with integrity and with compassion and with love, as opposed to doing it with violence. Because even though, you know, Will Smith used his hand and not a gun, it's still violence.
But you can't have it both ways. Will Smith can't be this kumbaya person and then exert such violence, and then you can't expect Chris Rock to just come into this kumbaya energy.
I don't expect it.
Somebody sounds like Chris is not ready and they ain't here for it.
I don't expect it, but I'm hoping for it. I'm praying for it, because I think that could be a really powerful example, you know, for men, particularly black men, you know, across the country and around the world, to see these two role models, these two really well-respected entertainers, you know, sort of come together, you know, and work through their differences in a constructive way. You know, I think restorative justice may still be possible. Obviously, there's some healing that needs to happen. And so I'm going to hold out hope. I'm going to do what Reverend Jesse Jackson encourages us to do. Keep hope alive. I'm keeping hope alive. Will, Chris, if you're listening, I'm keeping hope alive.
Live by the sword, die by the sword. Should have kept his hands to himself. Rock ain't ready for it.
Moving along, Eric R. Holder Jr. has been sentenced to 60 years to life for the murder of rapper Nipsey Hussle. Now, some fans speculate that the judge chose 60 years as a nod to Hussle's affiliation with the Rollin' 60s Crips in Los Angeles. Hussle was known for his community work, and various gangs came together in response to his death. The murder was the result of an argument between Holder and Hussle, who knew each other for years as members of the same gang.
All right, soulmates, have you heard about the new hip-hop fashion exhibit at the museum at the FIT? It's called Fresh, Fly, and Fabulous, 50 Years of Hip-Hop Style, and it explores the history of hip-hop fashion from the streets to the runway. Now, the exhibition features over 100 iconic garments and accessories that highlight key moments in hip-hop history. It even honors legendary designers like Harlem's own Dapper Dan with, I haven't heard that name in a while, who helped bridge the gap between streetwear and luxury fashion. In a recent interview, he talked about how his boutique in the 80s drew in celebs like LL Cool J and Salt and Pepper. And let me tell you, this is the hip hop culture has always been and will always continue to be on the forefront of culture itself, American culture. I mean, if you just look at the worldwide impact of hip hop culture, and then you got rap music, and then you have hip hop and hip hop's culture. When you have Asian kids perming their hair to get afros so they can look more like their favorite hip hop artists from over here in the States, that shows you the impact. And I clearly remember being first generation hip hop when they thought this thing was a fad and they thought it wasn't going to stick around, and it was just the worst thing ever. I felt at the time, regardless of how rogue some of those comments, some of those lyrics rather were, it was a reflection of our life. It was a reflection of what we were seeing, feeling, experiencing, and I always knew it was the real deal.
You know,
Still is.
And very similar to, you know, Motown has had, you know, the same influence. Rock and roll has had the same influence, and so this is sort of the next iteration of all of that and more. And so, moving along, Disney Plus has a new series called Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur, featuring Diamond White as the first black teen superheroine. White plays Lunella Lafayette and says that her character teaches kids about science and also represents the idea of beauty and brains. The show is described as all-inclusive and already renewed for a second season. White hopes that her role will encourage young black girls to embrace their intelligence and feel represented on the screen.
And we all know when young girls grow up, they become adults. And former child stars Camille Winbush and Dee Dee Davis from The Bernie Mac Show are facing criticism on social media for their participation on the adult platform OnlyFans. Don't act like you don't know. Leaked photos of the two showing more skin caused mixed reactions, with some fans understanding that they are grown women, while others expressed disappointment. Winbush clapped back at the haters on Twitter, defending her right to live her life as an adult. While on the show, you may remember Winbush played Vanessa, Bernie Mac's elder niece, and then Davis played Brianna, who he affectionately called Baby Girl. That was Mac's younger niece. And I think here, you know, for me, these women are grown. They can do what they want to do. I just think as fans, and because these shows are forever in syndication and we see them all day, every day, for some reason, we still think that those little girls are little girls in our heads, and we don't realize that they do grow up. Mm-hmm. They do age out of these roles, and they are adults. I mean, you have, you know, some of these child actors, they're parents now. They're grandparents now. Like, you got to get over it and realize that they've gone on with their lives. I just think syndication keeps that image perpetuated in our heads, you know? Yeah.
Think of people like Raven Simone and Lil Rudy from The Cosby Show. Mm-hmm. Well, coming up on the Black Report, we're celebrating Black excellence.
Say it ain't so. We'll tell you about how Disney is collaborating with Black-owned businesses to create new merchandise when we come back. You're watching Fox Soul's Black Report.
Welcome back to Fox Soul's Black Report, the place for our news, our views, and our voice. Curl Cap becomes the first Black-owned apparel company to offer authorized Disney merchandise for fans.
Yep, the partnership features new apparel, beauty items, food and beverage products, and toys. Curl Cap founder Brittany Sade is one of the Black businesses partnering with Disney, making history as the first Black-owned apparel company to have their own authorized Disney merchandise. I said it. Disney took notice of Sade's satin-lined backless curl caps and picked up the product, selling over 100,000 curl caps so far. Congratulations.
Go get your curl cap. Go get your curl cap.
Now Mickey, is it Minnie? No, Minnie. Mickey can wear one too, but Minnie gonna be wearing a curl cap.
I'm gonna get a beard cap. That's what I'm
Whatever that's supposed to look like. We don't want to forget today is Ahmaud Arbery Day. Take some time to remember and send prayers to that family, as they will always be in the healing process. I'm Courtney Hicks.
And let's do everything we can to do something about it. I'm Nicordelai Corte. Until next time, stay lifted.